Welcome to Book Nibbles Big Ideas, Small Bites. Timothy Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek is a book that challenges almost everything people believe about work, success, retirement, and freedom. Instead of offering a traditional self-help manual with incremental improvements, Ferriss presents a radical rethinking of how one can design life itself. The central promise is bold. You don't need to spend your life chained to a desk, working 40 to 60 hours a week for 40 years, only to hope for freedom in retirement. Instead, you can restructure your life so that you work far less, earn more in proportion to your effort, and reclaim the most valuable asset you have: time. Ferriss begins with his own story, which in itself reads like a parable. In his 20s, he was running a nutritional supplement company that looked successful from the outside. Sales were booming, the business was growing, and he was admired for being an entrepreneur. But in reality, he was drowning. He was working 80-hour weeks, answering hundreds of emails, and constantly managing crises. The more money the business made, the more Ferriss felt trapped. He was on the verge of burnout, and it seemed like the dream of entrepreneurship had become a nightmare. One day, overwhelmed, he decided to step away, traveling first to London, then Berlin, then to Argentina where he discovered tango. He realized that stepping outside of the standard model of more hours equals more success gave him clarity. He began questioning the assumptions he and everyone else had lived by. Why defer life until retirement? Why not create mini retirements throughout life? Why not design a business that funds your lifestyle instead of consuming it? This became the seed of the new rich philosophy, the lifestyle Ferriss advocates. The new rich, or NR as he calls them, are not the millionaires who hoard wealth while chained to their desks. They are people who define wealth by freedom of time, location, and choice. They measure success not in dollars, but in the ability to do what they want, when they want, and where they want. The promise of the book is to teach the reader how to become one of the NR by embracing a new framework Ferriss calls DEAL: definition, elimination, automation, and liberation. But rather than presenting this in stiff instructional sections, Ferriss mixes his framework with stories, experiments, and provocations. The first mental shift is about definition. Most people, Ferriss argues, live with vague, inherited definitions of success. They say they want to be rich, but what they really mean is that they want freedom. He offers an example. Imagine you had $1 million in the bank. What would you do differently tomorrow? Maybe you travel to Italy, take up painting, or spend more time with your kids. Now, instead of focusing on the $1 million, focus directly on designing a way to have those experiences. He calls this dreamlining, writing down what you want to do, be, and have, and then calculating the actual cost. Often the dream costs much less than you think. A person might dream of living in Buenos Aires and taking tango lessons, imagining it would require millions. But Ferriss shows that with geo-arbitrage, earning in a strong currency like US dollars, and spending in a country with a lower cost of living, you can live that dream for a fraction of what it costs to stay in the US. The key is not millions in the bank, but rethinking what lifestyle you actually want. Ferriss also pushes readers to confront fear head-on. He uses an exercise he calls fear setting, where you write down the worst-case scenario if you take a leap. Say, quitting your job or asking for remote work. Often the worst case is not catastrophic. You might lose some income, move back temporarily with family, or take another job. The likely upside, however, could be life-changing. By deconstructing fear, you rob it of its power. Ferriss shares his own examples of taking leaps, like leaving his company in the hands of outsourced managers while he traveled. The business didn't collapse, and he realized he didn't need to be so indispensable. And once you've defined what matters, the next step is elimination. Here, Ferriss is ruthless. Most people confuse being busy with being productive. He introduces the 80-20 principle, or Pareto's law. 80% of results come from 20% of efforts. He gives practical examples. In his supplement company, he discovered that a handful of clients produced most of the revenue, while the rest caused endless headaches and wasted time. By firing the troublemakers and focusing on the top clients, he earned more while working less. He applies the same logic to tasks. Most emails, meetings, and interruptions don't matter. If you identify the vital few tasks that create the most impact, you can eliminate the rest. He pairs this with Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the time available. If you give yourself a week to finish a task, it will take a week. If you give yourself 24 hours, you'll likely get it done in a day. By combining the 80-20 rule and Parkinson's law, Ferriss teaches readers to cut the trivial many and set tighter deadlines to force efficiency. He suggests experiments like checking email only twice a day, or even once a week, instead of every few minutes. For most knowledge workers, constant email checking is the biggest productivity sink. He tells the story of how he set up an autoresponder, explaining that he checked email only once a week, and emergencies could be addressed through his assistant. Surprisingly, nothing exploded. The world adjusted. The third pillar, automation, is where Ferriss gets practical with delegation. He explains that to free yourself, you must remove yourself from the machine. This doesn't only mean hiring employees, it means using virtual assistants, systems, and technology to run your life and business. He shares how he hired virtual assistants from India and other countries for a few dollars an hour to handle tasks like scheduling, email management, and research. For example, instead of spending hours booking flights, he would send a request to his assistant, who would return with the best options. He insists that even people who don't own businesses can benefit from this. Delegating personal errands like ordering groceries, paying bills, or finding gifts. The mental shift is recognizing that your time is worth more than the few dollars you might spend outsourcing. For entrepreneurs, automation means creating businesses that run without your constant involvement. Ferriss calls these muses, small online businesses that generate cash flow with minimal management. He gives examples like selling nutritional supplements, creating online courses, or designing unique products. The trick is to automate sales through websites, outsourcing fulfillment, and setting up customer service through virtual assistants or third-party companies. Once the system is running, you monitor metrics rather than micromanaging. This way, the business funds your lifestyle rather than consuming your life. The final stage is liberation, and this is where Ferriss really attacks the assumption of deferred life plans. Most people, he argues, slave away in jobs they dislike, waiting for retirement. But retirement is a worst-case scenario insurance policy. It assumes you'll be too old to enjoy life when you finally have free time. Instead, Ferriss advocates taking mini retirements throughout life. Rather than waiting until 65 to travel the world, you might spend 3 months in Thailand in your 30s, 6 months in Argentina in your 40s, and so on. These sabbaticals recharge you, expand your worldview, and give you stories richer than any corporate grind could offer. Liberation also means freeing yourself from the office. Ferriss was ahead of his time here. Long before remote work became mainstream, he advocated working from anywhere. He gives scripts for negotiating remote work with your employer. For instance, start by proving your productivity from home 1 day a week, then scale it up. If you can demonstrate that you produce better results outside the office, many employers will agree. Once you've shown it's possible, location independence becomes a reality, and you can relocate to wherever you want, often saving money by living abroad. Throughout the book, Ferriss peppers in wild, sometimes outrageous stories that illustrate his principles. He tells how he won a kickboxing championship in China by exploiting a loophole in the rules. If you pushed your opponent out of the ring 3 times, you won automatically. Instead of trying to outpunch bigger fighters, he used leverage, literally shoving them out until he took the title. The lesson is that winning doesn't always mean playing the same game as everyone else. It means bending the rules, finding shortcuts, and using creativity. He shares how he became a Guinness World Record holder in tango spins by focusing on an obscure subcategory of records rather than trying to compete in the most obvious field. Again, the lesson is to rethink assumptions. Ferriss also gives dozens of smaller tips and tricks that can dramatically change how you live. For example, instead of waiting on hold with customer service, use services like Get Human to skip queues. Instead of attending endless meetings, refuse any meeting without a clear agenda and goal. Instead of mindlessly consuming news, go on a low-information diet, eliminating newspapers, TV, and most media, which rarely affect your actual life. He claims that by cutting news, he freed hours of attention and still remained informed through friends and headlines. The common thread is questioning every assumed obligation and asking, does this serve me? One of the most powerful exercises he suggests is lifestyle design through geo-arbitrage. Imagine you earn $60,000 a year in the US, scraping by with rent, car payments, and expenses. Now imagine earning the same but living in Thailand, Argentina, or Eastern Europe, where costs are a fraction. Suddenly, your lifestyle is equivalent to that of a millionaire in local terms. Ferriss lived this himself, renting luxury apartments in Buenos Aires and taking private tango lessons for less than his rent in San Francisco. He challenges readers to stop asking, how can I afford this? And instead ask, how can I design this? Ferriss also emphasizes selective ignorance. He recounts how he stopped trying to answer every email, returning only those that mattered, and even putting, if this is important, call me in his autoresponder. The surprising result was that many things simply resolved themselves without his involvement. He learned that most urgencies are illusions, and by stepping back, people often solve problems themselves. This mirrors a management principle. If you always rush to solve your team's problems, they remain dependent. But if you force them to figure it out, they grow more capable. By the end of the book, the reader has not only a philosophy, but also concrete steps to apply. Ferriss challenges you to define your dreams in detail, calculate their costs, eliminate busy work, delegate tasks, automate income, and take the leap into liberation. He provides stories of readers who wrote to him after applying his methods, like the employee who negotiated a fully remote position and spent months surfing in Costa Rica while working a few hours a week, or the entrepreneur who built a muse selling t-shirts online and used the profits to fund 6 months in Europe. The tone of the book is irreverent, playful, sometimes arrogant, but always provocative. Ferriss wants to jolt readers out of complacency. He knows some will dismiss him as unrealistic, but he argues that being realistic is the most common path to mediocrity. By aiming for the unrealistic, a 4-hour work week, a business that runs itself, a lifestyle of freedom, you open possibilities others never consider. He insists it's not about literally working only 4 hours, but about drastically cutting unnecessary work so that your effort produces outsized results. In the end, the 4-hour workweek is less a manual and more a manifesto. It tells readers that life doesn't have to be deferred, that work doesn't have to be a prison, and that freedom is available now if you're willing to question the default script. It combines philosophy, strategy, and tactics in a way that invites experimentation. Ferriss himself admits he doesn't have all the answers, but he offers a toolkit for people to run their own experiments. The book remains influential because it offers not just advice, but permission. Permission to live differently, to quit the job you hate, to travel, to delegate, to stop checking email obsessively, to ignore the news, to design your own life. For some, it may sound extreme, but for others, it's a wake-up call that reshapes their entire trajectory. Whether you apply every trick or just adopt the mindset that time is more valuable than money, the core lesson is unforgettable. You don't have to wait until retirement to start living. You can redesign your life now. And that's it. The 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next Nibbles.